Well, hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Guitar Talk. We love to chat about music and guitars and amps. We like the vintage ones. We like the new ones. We love them all. If there's 6 strings on it or 4 strings, I'm probably interested in it. I'm very excited about today's guest. He has performed with a bevy of blues greats that the list is incredible. Described as volcanic by the Boston Globe. He's appeared with acts such as the legendary Honey Boy Edwards, John Lee Hooker, Mighty Sam McLean. Jerry Portnoy is also one of his good friends. Kim Wilson, Duke Robillard, Tommy and Chris, we all know them as the rhythm section for Stevie Ray's Double Trouble. Susan Tedeschi, Tony Lynn Washington, who he often accompanies with his band, providing support for her when he's not leading his own band. Roomful of Blues, Boston's James Montgomery, Sugar Ray Norcia, Debbie Davis, and Steve Miller. And he's also the only blues man that I know who is a doctor of the blues. He has received his honorary doctorate from Harvard University. And whether he's testifying a B.B. King solo or swinging like mad, you immediately know that you're in the company of the real deal, a true, amazing blues man. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you today, folks, Ricky King Russell. Good morning, Rick.
Morning, Michael. Thank
Welcome
you for
aboard.
having me today.
It's great to have you with us.
A real pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about your beginnings, getting into the guitar, and what led you into the blues music?
Well, I was lucky enough, first thing, to be born in the 50s. I was born in the early 50s, so I think that in a lot of ways that's a golden era for guitar-based music, certainly.
I agree.
Lucky enough to have older siblings at that time, and that being the case, they brought a lot of music, modern music, late 50s music into the house, and I was lucky enough to hear it. I'm the little brother, so whatever your older sisters
That's what
are doing, this is what they're dancing to in the living room in the day. So I was lucky enough that my older sister's boyfriend at the time, it turned out to be her husband, was into black music in the 50s. There was a phenomena, and still is, especially with AM radio, is a phenomena called skip, where radio signals, particularly strong ones, can bounce off the ionosphere, and you can hear radio stations from quite a distance away. In those days, radio stations a lot of them went from sun up to sundown. So there would be radio stations in the Massachusetts area that their frequency was gone and could be taken up by another one, and my sister's boyfriend got to hear black blues from Hoss Allen's show in Nashville.
Wow.
Up here on the skip, they call it, you know what I mean? So he would hear this stuff and they would listen to it, and he would venture into the city, into Boston, to go find said records. So Jimmy Reed came into the house, John Lee Hooker came into the house, Ray Charles came into the house, the current rock and roll of the day, Elvis, Buddy Holly, you know what I mean?
Fantastic.
Eddie Cochran. I was very lucky to hear these things. So I always had an ear. You know, you could say that, Buddy Holly or Eddie Cochran in particular, you know, a lot of great little lead guitar licks.
Sure was.
You know what I mean? She was sure fine looking, man. Wow, she's something else. You know what I mean?
Put those little teaser licks in there.
So, as the 60s came along, the early part of the 60s, I was still into the music and the twist craze, you know, Chubby Checker and everything. Gary and the U.S. Bonds, the 2:45, produced in New Orleans at Cosimo Matas's place, you know, had that sound. And then, bang, 1964, here are the Beatles. And I'll confess, at first, after listening to the music I grew up with, I thought it sounded almost kind of, I don't know, thin or kind of tinny. I wasn't in tune with the English sound.
Well, they were emulating the early stuff anyway.
Yeah, but just their whole production value and, you know, the way they came to it. But then, of course, you couldn't resist. And so that sort of got me to the guitar thing. So I started playing guitar around 1962 with a traditional guitar teacher at the YMCA, a dime a lesson.
Wow.
Try to learn how to read. Oh my God, read to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. I've never been the best reader, but more of an ear guy.
Yep. Same here.
So as time went by, we emulated the Beatles with tennis rackets and knitting needles, which quickly enough turned into my first guitar, which was something that Dad brought home that he bought off a guy, acoustic guitar, something to get started on. At first I thought I was going to thump the bass, and I still do, but quickly enough, the Days and Nights, my first band, probably, 1965, 6,
wow.
around there, trying to get gigs at high school dances, any
Yep.
opportunity to play somebody's party in their basement.
Absolutely. And there was opportunity for those things for kids back then, teenagers, and
Certainly.
I don't know what it's like for kids today starting in bands, but I know there were garage bands in every neighborhood back then, and you could get these little jobs at the local church or high school, and
it was the big thing. I grew at that time where I was living in Somerville, Massachusetts, and growing up there, and it was the big thing to be able to get on at the Saturday night dance. That was the big thing, you know what I mean? And they were, the great local bands, and then they'd try to bring in a name headliner.
Yep.
At some of them, and then it would just be, that kind of thing that, well, you can come up and play 3 songs on the break. You know what I mean? For these guys. And
it's a great opportunity.
First time I ever got to plug into a real Fender amp was on one of these things.
And those Fender amps back then, if we only knew, of course, but that was the dawn of the best sounding amps.
The first one I ever got a chance to plug into was, there was a band from Somerville, Mass. I don't know if they were from Somerville, but they were called the Agents 007, so that gives you an idea of when they were. And they had all white, blonde Fender head and cab, so I got to plug into somebody's Bandmaster or Showman, I forget exactly which one, but it was a white one. And it paled compared to my little Radio Shack realistic.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll tell you something about my first real electric guitar and amp. Dad brought me to Radio Shack for Christmas. And, I got the prototypical Japanese cipher guitar, which was probably, some sort of Taisco Del Rey.
Oh, I remember those, yeah.
Something like that. And a amplifier, but the amplifier had a great feature, which turned out to be a great feature for me, was the fact that in the back it had a record player.
Wow.
So the record player would flip down, and you could put the record on and play along. Now I got something to play with. Now I don't have to wait till the song comes on the radio. And I wore out Gloria by the Shadows of Night.
Oh, sure.
Killed that one on that one. I wore out a lot of records, trying to learn how to play and stuff like that. And
that goes to show you, though, that speaks to where we were at as far as culture and society with music, that they put a record player right on the amp. I mean, that's how popular the guitar was.
Well, you're playing at the party, and you're going to take a break, and somebody wants to spin some platters, man. You know what I mean?
There it is.
There it is.
That's fantastic.
And you know something? That same amplifier, there's a publication, Vintage Guitar Magazine. Well, that same amplifier was a feature.
Wow.
In Vintage Guitar.
I've never seen one of those before.
Actually, if you go back and look in the Radio Shack online, if you look at Radio Shack catalogs, you can find it. I did. You know what I mean? It was definitely a time-traveling thing.
Absolutely. There was a local music store in Taunton called Charles Bean Music, and they had one in Quincy, too, their other store. And that was the first place I ever laid eyes on, a real Fender Bandmaster. And then they had a Bandmaster Reverb that you don't see many of.
Right.
And but my first amp was a custom. One of those tuck and roll things.
You're lucky. That was a big.
It was pretty cool, and I was a big John Fogerty fan. So
there you go. Now you got his tone.
I wanted one of his amplifiers, and
sure.
Now of course, as we know, these old amps are all worth a small fortune when you can find them in working condition. Even in unworking condition, they're still very sought after.
I don't turn away things that are broken.
Well, you know how to fix them.
Well, if I don't, I know who does.
You know who does, yeah.
Sure.
And I think that's a valuable skill to any musician, is knowing a little bit of repair and tech work. I know very little. I can do a basic setup, and I know a few things about amps, but not enough. I've never been good at it, and
You always have to develop. I call it survival skills.
They are
You know, how many times? Let's see. I've had some interesting things happen. I had
on the job.
a Marshall 412 went up in flames on me one time. The 412 cabinet went up literally in flames on the bandstand, wired to a dead short. Somebody got in and played with the wiring and.
I remember lugging those things around.
Gee, my tone sounds really thin tonight. What happened? Poof.
That's in flames. There you go. That's fantastic.
That's amazing, really.
Fantastic.
Held a fuse in the back of an amp one time with a screwdriver leaned against the wall. So.
That's ultimate survival right there.
Got to get through the night.
Yeah. You know, and we fast forward a little, and I first got to hear you live when you performed at the now gone, unfortunately, Benjamin's here in Taunton. And
Diane Benjamin's a good friend, and she was good to us, and she always supported the music.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a couple of things struck me right away when of course, your playing sounded phenomenal.
Thank you.
That little amp blew my mind. I'd never heard a solid state amp sound like that in my life, like the one you're going to show us today.
You're referring to the Quilter Micro Pro Plus.
But I was very struck. You were just letting lots of folks come up and sit in. You had some very, high-profile guests, of course, but a lot of just local guys that could play pretty well. You were giving them a shot to come up and play. Mm-hmm. And I walked out of here thinking, here's a guy that's really making a contribution to the blues scene by doing this. And what do you think at this point of the blues scene in New England, and what can we do to continue to keep it vibrant and moving in the right direction?
To take the first part of your question, I think the blues scene here, particularly in the Boston area, it might not look the same as it does, or as it did. Some time ago, there was the Stevie Ray Renaissance, let's call it.
Yes,
was very good, for the blues music, because it gave us a chance in the midst of a flock of seagulls.
Yeah, it was lame
new wave
time,
bands.
Yeah.
Where you never heard the guitar, really, or now the guitar is back. So it was great in that respect. The scene was okay. There were a few more venues. There were some bigger venues, but now it seems like there are hidden venues. Like there are smaller venues. They're more spread out, but they're here, and I hear myself and my fellow professionals as we're talking about. Maybe we're bemoaning the fact, it isn't like it was, but it is like it is, and there are places that are still doing it. I had the opportunity to work at a couple of them in town, in Boston, and there are a few other, and there's one like the Sandbar here in Taunton.
Yep.
that have taken a stance on something. This is important music to have, and they're going to have it, and that's a really great thing. There's a lot of really good young players coming up. That puts the biggest smile on my face.
That's promising.
When you said I bring friends up, well, if you're a friend of the blues, then you're a friend of mine.
There you go.
You know what I mean? The blues isn't just my vocation. It's not just my job. It's my avocation. I love this. Okay?
Right, and it's evident in the playing.
Let's not make any bones about the fact that I really adore and treasure this kind of music in a lot of its forms. It gets a little clannish and a little cliquey sometimes. What's real blues? What's not real blues? Well, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's not all Robert Johnson anymore.
It's not.
And on the same hand, it's not all Joe Bonamassa. That's not the final statement either. It's just individual statements. And I think the more as a genre we try to individualize.
Right.
Take everybody for what they are and what they're offering, not so much, well, it sounds like Muddy or it sounds like this. Try not to bag it up too much.
When I hear folks having debates at some of the jams or the open mics, complaining, Joe B's too rock and roll, he's not like Bob Margolin, that's the real stuff, or go back even further to Robert Johnson. But at the end of it, I'm just glad there's a debate and there's a conversation.
You're
so
right.
We've got passionate people discussing blues music in its various forms and incarnations.
I've loved the blues for as long as I can remember.
Yep.
I loved the blues before I even knew it was the blues, before I really knew what I was listening to.
Yep.
But, just as you have, I've done other things too. I played Stairway to Heaven for money. You know what I mean? For a gig, for a job, to be as part of the band.
We know what it is to be a working musician.
You do what you do, and I didn't hate playing Stairway to Heaven. You know,
Right.
I liked Zeppelin. You know what I mean? That was cool at the time.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Then from Led Zeppelin and Hendrix and Cream and Jeff Beck and those guys in the late '60s, you go back and then you learned who Freddie King was, and then you learned who Muddy Waters was, and you learned who Sonny Boy Williamson too was. You know what I mean? There was always it was important always to look back, you know, to me, and to do the little extra digging. A great guitar player who was my first teacher, a guy named Pete Caro, turned me on to John Mayall and the Blues Band, the Blues Breakers. I'm sorry, record, the first Blues Breakers album with Eric Clapton, the prototypical Les Paul through a Marshall amp sound, the sound of that thing, kind of like really notched it in, right? But Peter turned out to be one of the greatest finger pickers that you'll ever hear, but he started there. You know what I mean? And then sort of went to there, like we all do.
That's right.
We all go through something to get to somebody. I'm just glad I got the chance to come back to what I really love the most.
So I'm looking over here at this interesting Silvertone guitar. If you want to grab it and just bring it over and tell us a little bit about that, because boy, that guitar, or at least that company, they put guitars in a lot of youngsters' hands years and years ago when you could order them out of catalogs before we had internet.
One of the first here, I'll hold it up so we can get a shot of it. So this is a 1959/60 Silvertone Danelectro. Silvertone as in sold by Sears.
Yes.
Danelectro by manufacturer, right? And it's, you know, kind of the typical poplar and masonite body, you know what I mean, with the lipstick tube pickup, which they called it a lipstick tube because it was two lipstick tube covers put together, sandwiched. You can see the seam, sandwiched over the magnet and coil. It was simply for protection. And the man who made these, Nat Daniels, was into keeping the overhead down. You know what I mean? So this was featured probably in the 1959 or 60 Sears catalog with an associated small amp as the rig for, like, you know, $49.99.
Yeah.
Something like that. This is a 3/4 scale one. It's, you know, it's shorter than the full size one, but I will guarantee you this guitar has tone like some other more extremely expensive ones that I have.
Right.
You know, there are ones that you could say that, oh, I could get stuck on a desert island with this one, and not hate this in the long run. You know, it will serve you well. So I have a real love for finding the odd. But I'll also say something. As this was the inexpensive starter guitar of its time, I think we're enjoying another kind of interesting renaissance whereas, you know, okay, you can go out and you can spend $7,000 or $8,000 on a Gibson Les Paul VOS, you know, ultra premium, you know, copy of a 58, 59, 60 Les Paul, and you can, which, you know, okay, you could spend easily $250,000 on that if you really wanted to, on a real one, or you ended up with this, and now with Chinese manufacturing being such as it is, there are a lot of really great.
I think we're in another golden age.
Another golden age.
I really do, as far as the guitar building.
As far as usable, okay, look, I can get this for $200. I have some guitars that are $200 guitars that are, like, you know,
perfectly serviceable, playable guitars.
And in some points beyond that.
I know it.
Okay, hardware upgrade, a pickup change, things like that. Okay, fine. That's just to your taste. But could you, if you took it, I mean, I've had this conversation with people that I could walk into Guitar Center with $300 and walk out with a guitar and an amp and go to a job and have no problem and actually enjoy it.
It'll sound good.
It'll be good. Yeah, it won't be, oh wow, I'm struggling.
Let's play a little something for the folks. Maybe you want to, I don't know which one you want to play.
I'll play this one so people can hear it.
All right.
All right. KV. 1, 2, 3. the morning when I heard my baby cry. Early in the morning when I heard my baby cry. It was a sad, sad day, yeah, when I told my baby goodbye. Crying at the back door. She was two-timing me. She's a mean, evil woman, but that's just the way she's gonna be. Hey, baby, say goodbye to me. Take me home, man.
All right. Wow, well, Rick, that guitar is unbelievable.
It's got a sound all its own.
It
really
does. That's a big sound.
Yeah.
And I can see why people like Jimmy Page prized him. He did a lot of, almost all of his slide work was on one of those.
Randy California.
Yeah.
The understudy to Jimi Hendrix. Randy California of Spirit was a Dan Electro guy.
No kidding.
Those first couple of Spirit records back in the day. A Dano.
You know, and of course, we got to plug those guitars into something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a minute and talk about tube amps. What are a couple of your favorite models, if you had a couple of Desert Island choices?
You know, right now I'm lucky enough to be sitting on a pretty good stash of things for the second. I've had some good fortune. Everybody's favorite, your favorite and mine, the Blackface Fender Vibrolux Reverb is kind of the perfect size, 30 watts, two 10-inch speakers. Will get you through pretty much any situation you could ask for. My good friend and associate Bobby Keys runs a rig with a Super Reverb on the bottom and a Vibrolux Reverb on top. And with
heaven.
his 335, he gets one of the most beautiful sounds of anyone I know. Personally, these days I lean a little more towards the early 50s tone. So now I'm talking more about the earlier Fender or Gibson or
The Tweed style amplifiers.
Tweed style amplifiers, right? Cathode bias, what does that mean? It's how the electricity goes into the final end of the amp to produce a sound. Remember, what comes out of our pickup as a millivolt goes out the speaker as a watt. That's a huge
quite a journey.
Amplification factor.
It surely is.
You know,
I never thought of it in those terms.
Right,
yeah.
from millivolt to watt, you know, there's a lot going on in there. But
Yep.
so I like the way Tweed amps sound. I like the way Tweed amps are voiced. If you think about it, they're the mother of everything. A 410 Bassman turned into the Marshall amplifier. The landscape is littered with things that have tried to copy the Fender Tweed Deluxe, the Fender Super. I like the 15-inch speaker, so I like a Tweed Fender Pro.
It's quite a sound.
Yeah, it's
quite a sound.
Even
And I mean,
bigger
some
than
of these
usual.
companies that are making copies, they're doing a good job. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's
the Tweed Deluxe that I field, for want of a better word, right now is a Mojo tone.
Yep.
Cabinet and parts that, okay, the nice thing about being able to build an amp, which I didn't, I bought it built, but okay, when you have an old amp, you face a dilemma. How much of this do I really want to change? Because the more you can leave it original the better.
Right.
In the long run, people are nuts on originality, but there are some things in a guitar amplifier that after 20, 30, 40,
die.
60 years, they just have to be changed.
You have to change capacitors and tubes are going to need to be replaced.
Certainly tubes. And so being able to have access to these things and sort of hear the difference, let's just say, it's a matter of what you're hearing. Now, this amp that I travel with a lot now, the Quilter amp, was made by a guy who knows guitar amplifiers, Pat Quilter, QSC Audio. They make a lot of,
Oh, okay. I never put that association together.
They make a lot of sound reinforcement stuff, and but Pat in the day, in the 70s, was an amp builder. He wanted to try to build an amp, so he always had this on his mind, and he knows the voicing is right. In other words, okay, he gives me in this one, and this is the older one. There's a newer version now. But he gave me a tweed tone that I could use, and he gave me a sort of blackface, for want of a better tone, that lives in there, and then he gave me his own tone. And then there's, a couple of waves that the reverb runs. So it gives you a lot of things. It just makes it so darn easy to grab something that's 20 pounds.
Instead of a super reverb.
Instead of a super reverb, or better. There are some guys who like to carry twins around. A guy at a jam session I was at the other day brought in an ultra-linear twin, which is a later 70s circuit design, which is one of the...
So loud, it's
the loudest version of the amp. Woo, baby, this one.
So where can folks hear you these days?
We
know the Sandbar Grill.
The Sandbar on October 20th.
October 20th, folks. Sandbar Grill in Taunton. We have great blues there every Thursday. And Ricky's been with us right from the start of that series. And you should come and hear him there. Where else?
I play at the Beehive in Boston, Massachusetts with the Cadillac Horn Band. I play at the Beat Hotel in Harvard Square with the Cadillac Horns. And then I can be found at places with, for instance, with my good friend Ed Shear of the Love Dogs, at the Corib Pub in Brighton on Tuesday nights. We have a wonderful all-star, you never know, evening. You never know who's going to show up or what's going to happen. But it's also one of the best laboratories you'll ever come to. It turns into one of those things that, okay, we're going to try this song, and without any...
Oh, that's always fun, that spontaneity.
The spontaneity is, and you know something, at my stage of the game, I really do have to work on keeping myself on my toes. I'm getting older. So you want to keep your skills in a good place.
And I know you'll be coming in again in Taunton at some point with Tony Lynn.
Yes, we'll have her again.
Tony Lynn Washington, folks, legendary blues singer.
My favorite. There are singers.
You're very lucky. You get to play with the best of the best.
There are singers though that
get talent too, of course.
But there are singers that get you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Tony Lynn is just one of those singers that gets you every time. The minute she opens her mouth, it's smooth. It's luscious.
Yep.
It's like a warm bath to me. I tell her every time I see her, Miss Tony, you could sing the phone book. And I would be happy to listen. No, she's a treasure. We're very, very, very fortunate to have her around here for us to hear.
And I think we're fortunate to have you around here playing, and we really appreciate your contribution to the blues and everything that you're doing. And folks, once again, come out to the Sandbar and see Ricky next month. You're going to be astounded at the caliber of this band.
If you like big band blues, and if you like to swing dance, we have a great group of swing dance folks there. There's plenty of people to dance with. There's a very, very nice, good-sized dance floor here at the Sandbar. Plenty of space to express yourself.
Absolutely.
And have a good time, and we'll play the stuff for you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Mike, thank you so much for having me.
All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.